The story opens in the unforgiving Montana Territory of 1887, where winter winds sweep across the plains and isolated ranches stand miles apart from civilization. Elias Boone, 38, lives alone on a struggling ranch outside the small town of Black Hollow. Once a hopeful young man with a wife and infant son, Elias has become emotionally hardened after losing them both to a harsh winter illness years earlier. He now lives quietly, keeping his distance from the townspeople and finding comfort only in his horses and cattle. His ranch is failing, his debts are growing, and he has little reason to believe his life will ever change. Everything changes when Elias visits Black Hollow to purchase supplies and encounters Samuel Whitmore, 47, a notorious drunk and gambler. Samuel is Clara's father, a violent man known for wasting every penny he earns. On this particular day, Samuel has lost a large gambling debt and is desperate to pay it. He offers his 19-year-old daughter, Clara Whitmore, as repayment, claiming that she is deaf, mute, and incapable of living independently. Samuel insists that Elias would be doing everyone a favor by taking her away. Elias is disgusted by the arrangement and initially refuses. But when he sees Clara standing silently beside her father, wearing a worn dress and carrying a small battered suitcase, he notices bruises on her wrist and fear in her eyes. Samuel treats her like property rather than a daughter. Elias eventually agrees to take Clara, not as a purchase, but because he believes he is rescuing her from a dangerous home. Clara arrives at Elias's ranch, but communication is difficult. She never speaks and pretends not to hear anything. Elias begins learning simple signs and uses writing to communicate with her. He tells her she will have a room, food, and safety, and that she owes him nothing. Clara seems suspicious of his kindness, clearly expecting him to behave like every other man who has controlled her life. As the days pass, Elias begins noticing strange details. Clara supposedly cannot hear, yet she sometimes turns her head before a horse approaches. She reacts when Elias drops tools behind her. One evening, Elias accidentally fires a rifle in the distance, and Clara instinctively flinches before quickly pretending she noticed nothing. Elias says nothing, but his suspicion grows. Clara also carries a mysterious notebook. Whenever Elias enters the room, she quickly closes it. When he eventually catches a glimpse of its pages, he sees detailed drawings of buildings, horses, wagon tracks, men, and strange symbols. He wonders whether Clara is secretly documenting something. Despite his suspicions, Elias slowly begins to trust her. Clara proves to be remarkably capable around the ranch. She understands horses, notices injured animals before Elias does, and possesses an unusual knowledge of the land. She also begins repairing the neglected garden and bringing life back to the ranch house. Their relationship develops gradually through small moments rather than romance. Elias begins seeing Clara as a person rather than a helpless girl who needs saving. Clara, meanwhile, begins to realize that Elias is not like her father. When Elias discovers that Clara has accidentally broken an expensive lantern, he expects her to panic. Instead, he calmly tells her that accidents happen. Clara is visibly shocked by his reaction. One night, Elias finds Clara outside the ranch house staring toward the distant hills. She suddenly turns toward a sound that Elias cannot yet hear. Moments later, 3 riders appear in the darkness. Clara's face changes completely. For the first time, Elias sees genuine terror in her eyes. The riders do not approach the ranch. They remain in the distance before disappearing into the darkness. Clara immediately begins packing her belongings, convinced that Elias will be endangered because of her. Elias stops her. Using his notebook, he asks her what she is running from. Clara refuses to answer. Elias then asks the question that changes everything. "You can hear me, can't you?" Clara freezes. For several seconds, neither of them moves. Then, slowly, Clara removes the disguise she has maintained for years. She whispers her first words to Elias. "Yes." Elias is stunned. Clara explains that she has pretended to be deaf and mute since childhood because her father became violent whenever she spoke. But the truth is even darker. Years earlier, Clara witnessed Samuel and several powerful men in Black Hollow involved in a deadly crime. A traveling banker named Thomas Bell had arrived in town carrying documents and financial records connected to a land scheme. Samuel and his associates wanted those records destroyed because they proved that several wealthy ranchers and businessmen were illegally stealing land from struggling settlers. Clara accidentally witnessed the men killing Bell. Before he died, Bell managed to hide a ledger containing the names, payments, and land deeds connected to the conspiracy. Clara later found the ledger and secretly took it, believing it was the only evidence that could expose the criminals. Since then, Samuel and his associates have been searching for her. Clara reveals that the mysterious drawings in her notebook are not random. They are maps and clues showing where she has hidden the ledger. But before she can explain everything, the sound of approaching horses reaches the ranch. This time, Elias hears them too. Samuel Whitmore has come for his daughter. And he has not come alone. The section ends with Elias standing between Clara and the approaching riders, realizing that the woman he thought he had rescued may actually be carrying the evidence that could destroy some of the most powerful men in Montana. Elias preparing to defend his ranch against Samuel and his men. Clara begs him not to interfere, insisting that Samuel is dangerous and that the men with him will kill Elias if they discover the truth. Elias refuses to abandon her. Samuel arrives at the ranch with 3 armed associates, including Caleb Rusk, 52, a wealthy landowner and one of the most respected men in Black Hollow. Caleb pretends to be concerned about Clara, claiming that Samuel has come to take his poor deaf daughter home. Elias immediately understands that the situation is more complicated than a family dispute. Caleb knows Clara's secret. The men search the ranch but find nothing. Clara maintains her act, pretending she cannot hear their threats. Samuel becomes increasingly violent, but Elias refuses to hand her over. When Samuel threatens to return with the sheriff, Elias calmly tells him that Clara is under his protection. The men finally leave, but Caleb secretly warns Elias that he has made a serious mistake. Elias knows the danger is only beginning. That night, Clara explains the full story. The ledger is hidden somewhere on Elias's property because she buried it before arriving at the ranch. She had chosen the location because Samuel would never suspect that she would hide the evidence in the home of a man who had unknowingly become her protector. Clara takes Elias to an abandoned section of the property near an old stone well. Together, they uncover a metal box. Inside is the ledger. Elias discovers that the conspiracy is far larger than he imagined. The records show that Caleb Rusk and several other influential men have been manipulating land claims, forcing poor settlers into debt, and using violence to seize their farms. Samuel was merely one of their hired forces. The evidence also reveals something personally devastating. Elias's own ranch appears on the list. Years earlier, Elias's wife had inherited the land from her family. After her death, Caleb secretly manipulated the records to claim the property. Elias's ranch has been targeted for years, and his growing debts were not accidental. Someone has been deliberately sabotaging him. For the first time, Elias understands that the loneliness and hardship he suffered may have been part of a larger plan. Clara blames herself for bringing danger to his doorstep, but Elias tells her that the criminals were already coming for his land. He refuses to let fear control their choices. Together, they devise a plan. Instead of running, they will expose the conspiracy. Clara knows the only person capable of helping them is Henry Mercer, 61, the town's aging newspaper editor, a stubborn man who has spent years fighting corruption. But reaching him is dangerous because Caleb controls the local sheriff and several deputies. Elias and Clara travel secretly toward town with the ledger hidden beneath the floorboards of their wagon. Along the way, they are ambushed by Samuel and his men. The confrontation forces Clara to finally stop pretending to be helpless. She warns Elias about the attackers before they appear, proving once and for all that she can hear perfectly. She uses her knowledge of the terrain to lead the attackers into a narrow canyon, allowing Elias to escape with the ledger. However, Samuel captures Clara. Elias returns to the ranch and discovers that Clara has been taken. For the first time in years, the lonely rancher realizes how deeply he has come to care about someone. He refuses to abandon her. Meanwhile, Samuel takes Clara to an abandoned mining settlement where Caleb is waiting. Caleb demands the ledger's location. Clara refuses to reveal it. Caleb finally tells her the truth about her father's involvement. Samuel was responsible for the death of Thomas Bell, but Clara's own father was also responsible for another tragedy. He had helped Caleb arrange the death of Clara's mother years earlier. This revelation breaks the last emotional connection Clara has to her father. But instead of surrendering, Clara secretly uses the skills she developed from years of survival. She manipulates Samuel into believing the ledger is hidden elsewhere, buys herself time, and manages to escape. At the same time, Elias reaches Henry Mercer and reveals the evidence. Henry immediately understands the importance of the ledger. If the information becomes public, the entire power structure of Black Hollow could collapse. The final confrontation takes place during a crowded town gathering where Caleb intends to announce a new land agreement that will allow him to seize dozens of struggling settlers' properties. Elias arrives with Henry and the ledger. Clara arrives moments later. The entire town watches as Clara steps forward and speaks publicly for the first time in years. She tells the truth about what she witnessed. She reveals the murder of Thomas Bell. She identifies the men involved. And she exposes the land conspiracy that has destroyed families across the valley. Caleb attempts to silence her, but Henry has already made copies of the ledger's records and arranged for them to be published. The evidence is now beyond Caleb's control. Samuel, finally confronted with his own crimes, tries to attack Clara. Elias intervenes. But the climax is not won by violence alone. Clara stands before her father and refuses to be afraid of him anymore. She tells him that he took her voice, her childhood, and her sense of safety, but he will never control her again. Samuel is arrested along with several conspirators. Caleb attempts to flee, but the townspeople stop him after learning how many families he has ruined. In the aftermath, Clara is no longer viewed as the helpless deaf girl everyone once pitied. She becomes the key witness who helped expose the corruption threatening the entire valley. Elias's ranch is saved when the fraudulent land claims are overturned. But the emotional conclusion focuses on something more important. Elias, once a man who believed his life had ended with the loss of his family, discovers that his ranch is no longer an empty place. Clara chooses to remain, not because she owes him anything, but because she finally has the freedom to choose her own future. The story ends months later as spring arrives in Montana. Clara is working beside Elias in the garden, no longer hiding behind silence. She still carries the battered notebook, but its pages are different now. The old drawings of escape routes and dangerous men have been replaced by sketches of the ranch, the mountains, and the life she is finally building. Elias asks her what she plans to do next. Clara smiles and answers aloud. For the first time in my life, Elias, I think I get to decide. Elias looks across the valley and realizes the truth of their journey. He thought he had rescued a helpless girl, but Clara had been carrying the courage that saved them both. The story closes with the ranch no longer representing Elias's loneliness, but a new beginning built on trust, freedom, and the unlikely bond between two wounded people who found a home in each other.